In New York, the Sandford family plans a vacation, renting a nice house on Long Island near a forest. The house is great, but the alcohol cabinet is locked. While the family gets settled, Mum Amanda goes to town for groceries. On the way, she notices Danny loading his truck with lots of supplies. Later, the family heads to the beach. Rose, the daughter, spots a big oil tanker ship far away. At first, they don't think much of it, but soon they realize it's heading towards the beach. People panic and run as the ship crashes into the sand. Luckily, no one gets hurt, but the beach is closed. Back home, the family finds out the Wi-Fi isn't working and their phones and TV have no signal. Amanda and her husband Clay are surprised to see deer in the backyard, thinking it's a good sign. In the evening, they hear a noise and someone knocks on the door. Clay gets ready to fight, but it's businessman George and his daughter Ruth, the actual owners of the house. George apologizes for showing up unannounced. All phones are out, and they had a power blackout coming back from the town. Since they can't get to their 14th floor apartment due to a bad knee, they ask to stay for the night. Amanda doesn't trust them, but George offers a 50% refund and promises to sleep in the guest room. To prove he's the owner, George opens the locked alcohol cabinet, revealing an envelope with $1,000 as compensation. Amanda is still cautious, thinking he might be the housekeeper. Clay convinces her to give them a chance. George shares some alcohol and explains Danny was his contractor. He also mentions his wife is away for his job. Amanda interrupts George and asks for ID, but George left his wallet in another coat at the theater due to all the chaos. This makes Amanda uneasy because George claimed he didn't know about the blackout until later. Suddenly, an alarm rings. Ruth turned on the TV, revealing a national emergency. Amanda has no choice but to let George and Ruth stay. In the basement, George reveals he knew something was up because a client warned him. The next morning, Amanda finds 4 emergency messages on her phone, 2 about the blackout, 1 mentioning possible hackers, and the last one full of random symbols. Concerned, she shows Clay, but the messages vanish. Clay decides to get a newspaper in town for more info, but his GPS isn't working, and he gets lost. Checking his phone, he misses a brief. Car radio report on a cyber attack causing an environmental disaster in the south. Unable to find a signal, Clay keeps driving, encounters a Spanish-speaking woman needing help, but decides to move on. He spots a drone with red smoke that turns out to be leaflets. Meanwhile, George checks on neighbors with his gun handy, worried about his wife's silence. The neighbor's house is a mess with no one around. George tries their satellite phone, but it's down. All American satellites are out. As he's getting ready to leave, he spots some stuff scattered near the beach. Curious, he follows the trail and discovers an expensive watch in the sand. When he tries to pick it up, he's surprised to find a whole arm, and he falls down, revealing the body of a pilot. Looking around, he realizes a plane has crashed on the beach. Just then, he hears another plane approaching, so he quickly runs and hides in a nearby house right before that plane crashes too. Meanwhile, in the house, Rose is frustrated because she wants to watch the final episode of Friends, but none of the devices are working. She goes outside and is amazed to find a large group of deer in the backyard. She convinces her brother Archie to go to the forest, where they come across an old shed. Inside, Archie teases Rose by saying someone could be watching her sleep through the window, startling her. On their way back, Archie gets bitten by a bug, and Rose sees another deer. She also notices all the birds flying away. When George returns, he tells Amanda that he sensed something was off because he observed the market acting strangely. As he describes what he found on the beach, their conversation is interrupted by explosions in the distance and a loud screeching noise that hurts their ears and cracks the windows. Amanda rushes into the woods to find her children, but the noise becomes unbearable, making her drop to her knees in pain. Fortunately, the noise stops, and everyone returns to the house. Amanda recalls seeing Danny buying a lot of things and suspects he knew something was going to happen. Clay returns and shows them a leaflet written in Persian, recognized by Archie from war video games, saying, "Death to America." Terrified, Amanda and Clay decide to go to a relative's house in New Jersey, ignoring George's warnings. As they drive away, they encounter sirens, and the road is blocked by self-driving cars. Amanda investigates and discovers there are no people around. More automatic cars appear behind them, and Amanda rushes back to her family just in time before the speeding cars crash into the ones blocking the road. The family dodges more incoming cars, and in the distance, the chaos extends into the city. The Sanfords have no choice but to return to the house, and George allows them to stay. As the rain starts falling, Archie stays in his room looking at pictures of Ruth, feeling a bit naughty. However, he starts feeling sick and decides to take a nap. Meanwhile, Ruth invites Clay to join her for a smoke, and Clay feels guilty for leaving a woman alone on the road. Suddenly, they hear splashing and find flamingos in the pool. Indoors, Amanda and George share a drink, and George confesses that he came to the house because a powerful client warned him about an evil group controlling the world. The client asked George to move his money and mentioned leaving for a while, making George suspicious. To lighten the mood, George takes Amanda to a room with his music collection, and they dance for a while. They get close, but realize they're drunk and have spouses. George agrees not to do anything but worries about his wife. The screeching sound starts, breaking lights and scaring away the flamingos. They use candles for light and decide to share beds for comfort. The next morning, they discover Rose is missing, possibly taking a bike. Archie wakes up with a fever, puking blood, and his teeth falling out. He thinks it's from a bug bite. George volunteers to take Clay and Archie to Danny for medicine. Amanda and Ruth search for Rose, but argue in the woods. They share their worries, starting to understand each other. They hear a noise and find Ruth surrounded by deer. Amanda scares them away, and they hug for comfort. Meanwhile, the men reach Danny, who explains the noise caused radiation and assumes the Russians recalled their people, suggesting war. Danny prioritizes his family and refuses to help, suggesting they go to neighbors with a bunker if they need assistance. George won't go away without the medicine, so he pulls out his gun, and they start arguing while pointing their guns at each other. Clay steps in, saying he's not much help, but pleads for the medicine. He talks about how both he and Danny just want to protect their families. Danny eventually agrees to give them the medicine in exchange for money. While Archie has the medicine, Danny shares more info. The Koreans are behind all this, according to him. Clay argues it's the Iranians, showing a leaflet as proof. Danny counters, saying a friend in San Diego, who's a veteran, saw similar leaflets in an East Asian language before the phones went out, maybe Korean or Chinese. Danny thinks multiple enemies are teaming up to destroy the country. Back in the car, George admits Danny's info matches a rumor he heard. It's a three-stage plan to break down the country's government. First, cut off communication and transportation, making people scared. Second, create chaos, as seen with people turning on each other. Third, citizens plan a coup or civil war, collapsing the country. Clay and George decide to stick together and take their families to the neighbor's bunker. In the woods, Amanda and Ruth search for Rose and freeze when they see Manhattan on fire. Explosions and gunfire echo through the city. Meanwhile, Rose has been in the neighbor's house the whole time, breaking in and enjoying food. She hears her mother calling, about to leave when she sees a light from the basement. There, she finds an emergency bunker with everything needed, including a gym and a greenhouse. An emergency alert says the White House and major U.S. cities are under attack, with rising radiation levels. Rose discovers a huge DVD collection, including Friends. She grabs a disc and finally watches the last episode of her favorite show. If you like the video, consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you.